Good evening, everyone. It is 6:30, November the 16th, and with the time upon us, we will call to order and begin the Wildwood Building Committee meeting this evening. To begin, if we can have roll call, please.
Paul Ruggiero, here.
Jeff Hull here.
Brian Perry, here.
Marian Galezzo here.
Paul Millerani, here.
Diane Allen here.
Greg Bendel here.
Kristen Walsh here.
Great, thank you.
Melissa Plowman here.
Kevin Kyra, alternate here.
Thank you, Mr. Kyra. We are not certain on the status of Mr. Ragsdale. We're checking on that from the school committee, but certainly Ms. Plowman as an alternate is here tonight. So hopefully you have an agenda before you that, thank you, Tracy, who sent that out a little while ago. So tonight we'll start with the second item, and that is the approval of minutes from October the 18th, 2021's meeting. Just as a point of reminder, if not for the committee, but members of those that are in the community, with this Wildwood Building Committee, we fully intend to maintain and provide regularly both agendas as well as approved minutes from these meetings. The last meeting that we had reflects the very first meeting of this committee, and so following the hopeful approval of the committee tonight of the minutes, they will be posted on the website that we have. And all of the information that is contained and discussed within the context of these meetings, just as a reminder, we will be sure to post and make available for members of the Wilmington community on that website. So hopefully you have the minutes before you, and unless there are any comments or recommendations for changes, we'll be looking for the approval of minutes from October the 18th, 2021.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Tracy, that passes. Great, thank you so much for that. The third item is, and really largely the primary purposes for gathering tonight, and as you'll recall, we discussed at the last meeting trying to solidify a communication plan for bringing into this conversation and these plans the wider community. Obviously, this is a fairly lengthy process, but we also recognize that communication and bringing to the attention of our community members and stakeholders, this really hinges around communication. And so the first of sort of two parts to this is the gathering your thoughts and suggestions around a brochure. We talked about, you'll recall, a couple of things last time. One was centered around circulating information, written information, that we could share town-wide with community members. We also talked about forums or engaging in person-to-person, if you will, communication, which we'll get to in just a moment. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at what absolutely is intended to be a draft brochure. That was the multi-page color brochure that, again, thanks to Tracy for her help in putting this together and sharing this with you. You have. It is watermarked draft, and it's with full intention that it is just that. It's a starting point, and so tonight I certainly very much would welcome your thoughts and ideas. As I piece this together, if some context I could just provide. So really, all of the content in here, I gathered from previous documents or artifacts that were put together, whether that be in some cases from the Mass School Building Authority applications, whether that was from presentations that were shared with either the school committee or the finance committee or selectmen last year. And so what I tried to do was really just gather what seemed to be the more pertinent ideas that could try and tell the story for the person, the member of our community who's completely uninformed about, this effort, why we're here, what it's about, and so on. So anyway, with that as the backdrop, very happy to take any thoughts or ideas or suggestions on the draft brochure, if you will, or document.
Dr. Brand, if I could just offer a few comments, just on the, I guess would be the third page of this town master plan. I would just note in terms of the listing of committee members, there was actually not a member of the school committee or board of selectmen on the facility master plan committee itself. They certainly were different opportunities where members of both committees attended meetings, but just looking at the final document here that we have, and we did not include a member from either of those committees.
And so
Excuse
just
me,
to-
Jeff, where are you? Where are you?
So I'm looking at the facilities master plan document that was released in January of 18. So on page 3 of this document we have before us under town master plan, and it references committee members included, committee members along with representatives from the town's permanent building committee, finance committee, school committee, board of selectmen, town administration, and school departments. So all of that is accurate, except for the fact that there was not a school committee member or a member of the board of selectmen on the actual facility master plan committee. Then just going forward, so page, I guess would be page 5, it references Wildwood school building information, and then at the bottom of the page, impact on teaching and learning. Just a minor suggestion here, there's a bullet point that reads, airflow and air quality are impacted by the age of the, I would suggest, ventilation system. And then this would be page 7, at the bottom of the page, Wilmington High School as an example, and it references the blocks there that, in terms of the amount of money for the project, and then how it was divided up between the cost to the town and the MSBA portion. And I guess I just have some measure of caution there. This certainly, I guess, could be used as an example, but I think as we've learned, at least some of us in talking with Dan Pilata, in fact, who happens to be doing some work for us as the OPM on other projects, he's noted that more recently here, because the amount of MSBA funding has not increased to the level that the demand for these projects has, we should expect a lower percentage of funding from MSBA as a total part of the project. So I'm not sure how we want to handle that, but I don't want to set false expectations. It's certainly going to be helpful, clearly, to have MSBA funding, but whereas we, if you recall, the gross amount from MSBA was something in the order of 55%, Paul, and I think the net amount was something around 49 or 50. From what I'm hearing, the more likely scenario is something in the 35% range, if we get to that stage.
Do we take that piece out and the last bullet up top, the level of reimbursement varies by community and is determined by a variety of factors before final approval of costs is shared with citizens. Does that say enough? It's on that same page, the last bullet.
Right.
We add something there.
I think it may be sufficient, and perhaps not include the example for the high school. And we can certainly include the picture of the high school, noting that we did receive MSBA funding for the high school, but if someone is reading this, are they going to presume that, was almost, that going forward, that we will get something close to a 50-50 match, if they look at the bar graph there.
Any other thoughts or, thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts on that piece?
Yeah, Dr. Bren, on the part that says, what if we don't pursue any new or renovated school facilities? And I was looking at the bulleted item, it says, it is estimated that in the next 7 years, Wilmington should spend almost $10 million just to maintain the infrastructure of our 6 elementary schools. So, I'm just trying to think outside the box here, that people say every year we go to town meeting and the manager here meets with department heads and goes over budgets, and I'm not so sure that that's a correct dollar amount. Did you give him that amount, Jeff, by any chance?
The numbers in here, I believe, and I don't have the book in front of me, but we have a capital improvement 5-year document that lists various projects out 5 years. And I believe, but again, I can't confirm this because I have not compared these numbers against what is in the budget, that these were taken from that document. But again, it's a good point. I think, given the current situation we've seen between the supply chain issues and just the cost of supplies and materials for a variety of things, including construction materials, I would not be surprised if these numbers are actually higher than the numbers that are currently listed, which I can't recall the date on this, but it was probably fiscal 21 maybe, or 20.
Mr. Hooper, if I remember correctly, and this was the slide, or this table rather, was this data that was used in one or maybe all, I can't recall, of the presentations last spring, I think it was, or the winter, may have been with the selectmen and such. And I do think Mr. Hooper, he provided those numbers to me, and I believe he did take them from the facility, the master plan tracking document, if you will.
The only thing I do remember too is that the window replacement part, I know for one of the schools, you went through MSBAB for
Right.
money, correct?
Yes,
They
Shawshene.
participated. Which school was that?
actually, it wasn't the Shawshene, it was the North.
North.
The North Intermediate, yes, that, you're correct, the North Intermediate, right. So, so with regard to some window replacement, I don't know if, that would be, but listing the items, I guess, yeah, people have to take into consideration some inflation in the prices.
I think the underlying point, though, is appropriate, that even if the town were to take no action whatsoever and not pursue a new school, there's still going to be significant investments in these schools to keep them in a place where the heating is appropriate and all the various elements are there. And, the unfortunate piece of that is, unless we do substantial renovation or rehabilitation, the buildings aren't going to be, the spaces and the access and so on aren't going to be up to current standards, but we're still going to be putting substantial money in for roofs and windows and all those kind of things, heating systems.
And I would think that would be a good thing. Also as a taxpayer, I would expect that our facilities are maintained to the best that we can provide. And some of them are old enough that need that those replacements. I mean, it's no different than owning a home after so many years, so I definitely go along with that. The other question that I do have is, being a member of the Master Facilities Plan, I remember that we separated the project up into the public municipal buildings and the school buildings. And when we finally finalized that report, it came about that there was some consolidation that was going to be done, and closing, but the architect made it clear that in order to do that, there was a cost associated with that. That being said, how does, what are you telling the people of Wilmington to build a new school, or are we following some sort of plan with the master facility plan in consolidating? Because there's been recent information that's out there about the enrollments dropping, and I didn't think that was helping this particular project at all, because normally when you're looking to build schools, you look at increased enrollment. But I guess I'm trying to associate what the plan is for going forward and incorporating the master facility plan that had very specifics attached to it.
Well, if I understand the question, which I think I do, and so maybe that's an important element that's missing from this draft, because it's my thought that part of this story, if I can use that word, is that it's been recommended to us as a community that pursuing consolidation, school consolidation, specifically focusing on that, would be a prudent way to proceed for a number of reasons, not the least of which is many aspects were pointed out, as I recall, in that facilities master plan. The overall operational costs to maintain, to operate, and that mapped alongside our enrollment would really seem to open up an important opportunity for our community to pursue consolidation, which is, as members of the committee may recall, was really a centerpiece to our application to MSBA, that we've conveyed to them that we are very interested in exploring consolidation. So I think to that extent, or to that end rather, and if that is missing or absent from this document, that would be, to me, quite an important thing to expand upon, or to be more pointed on. And trying to convey, and I acknowledge with this before you as a draft, there's an awful lot of different layers to this. There's an awful lot of information, and to try and condense it all into something that's readable and digestible, I did find admittedly a challenge. So this is meant to be a rough cut, a first pass. But if that piece that you're mentioning, Diane, seems to be absent, then perhaps members of the committee think that would be important to expand upon or to highlight in a different way.
If I could, so on the facility master plan, you're right in that I think the community, one of the things was to reduce the number of transitions we have. So that would lead to consolidation. So that's clearly something, and we've conveyed that to the MSBA in various conversations we've had with them. In the enrollment projection process, we had to send them some enrollment information, and we included the target school, which essentially is the Wildwood, but we also included if we made it a pre-K to grade 3 school or pre-K to grade 5 school, just so that we could, they knew that we were interested as a community in consolidation, and then it kind of goes from there, I think. So they have not come back to us. We submitted this, I think, in end of September. They're supposed to come back and have some discussions between then and the end of December when we sign off on enrollment projection. So I think in those conversations, and then ultimately after that, if we get invited into the next phase, when you have an architect and an OPM, you kind of now look at those options of consolidation. Am I correct,
Right.
Jeff? On
I don't think that the way it was established, well, certainly consolidation is one of the things that we want to take a serious look at. I don't think that's the only option that the town put on the table. It very well could be that it could be a standalone school, but certainly consolidation was one element, and it did come from the facilities plan. It was suggested there for the reasons that Paul described, the reduction in transitions, and certainly there's, as it's noted in, I think even in this document here, the prospect of consolidation, you don't have as many gyms or ancillary spaces to maintain as with 4 buildings as you would with 6. So there's presumably some opportunities to reduce costs there, but all of that, I think, is ultimately going to be vetted and explored when we get to, or if we get to the next stage, which is the feasibility process, and we begin to have, with the assistance of an architect, look at all these options.
So would the SBAB allow us, through the feasibility study, and I'm just going to give a hypothetical situation here, that if the architect comes up with a plan of consolidation and does not include the actual building of a new school, but perhaps additions or modifications to our existing buildings to provide this consolidation, to address the downsizing, and to look at the 10 years out that normally is done. Is that something that SBAB funds? I'm hearing one project, but if we're looking at consolidation and we're looking at maybe 4 schools of significant modifications to them to accomplish this goal, has that been discussed with MSBA?
What we're quite confident on, in the understanding, and chime in, but is that with where we're at in this process right now, we have declared that the Wildwood is our priority project. Out of 6 applications, it was our priority project, our priority building. And so the MSBA has agreed through this process to partner with Wilmington with a clear understanding that number 1 is our priority project. Number 2, that we are open to the idea of exploring consolidation. And as long as Wildwood is a part of any possible consolidation project, future school, whether it be on the Wildwood site or any other site, as long as the current population, if you will, teachers and students, programs and services at the Wildwood School are a part of any brand-new building or building that is renovated and expanded. As long as that's the case, then this project can continue to advance with MSBA. If through the process something changed course on that somehow, and that through this process it was determined that the Wildwood School should on its own remain where it is with its current population, and that was no longer in our sites, then I think we have to forfeit or abandon or withdraw our application and our interest. correct?
Yeah, I think that, so the Wildwood is kind of, I'll use the word anchor, it's not, it doesn't have to be in that site, but whatever we do, it's either a new pre-K and K without the, that's a new Wildwood, if you will, or consolidation, as this example would be, you know, the Wildwood and Woburn Street, as an example. That could be a project, and that's why when we gave enrollment, we kind of included those numbers as well, the enrollment at the Woburn Street and so forth. And then, so that's all on the table, and then whether it's a new building, because part of the process will be an architect and an OPM, you know, does Wilmington have a site large enough to accommodate a bigger building, or do we take the Woburn Street School and renovate that and add on to it and so forth? I think that's all down the road as options. One thing they said, you can only do one project at a time, so we could only do, you know, use that side of town initially, and once that gets going, then, you know, we'd have to apply again through the process. So they wouldn't, it would be considered one project, even though it may encompass 2 schools. That's my understanding, or 3 schools, my understanding. And we had talked about, you know, that'd be a very large school, but if you did pre-K to 5.
That's where I was confused, Paul.
Yeah,
That's where I was
still.
confused, what was considered a project by SBAB, if we were considering multiple additions to several schools. If I understand what you're saying correctly, is we have the Wildwood School, and whether we make modifications or build a new one in place of that, or somehow or other, through the feasibility study, a modification to an additional school to accommodate the Wildwood School. That's considered one project.
That's our understanding. That would be one project. We couldn't modify the Wildwood and modify the Woburn Street. That would be 2 different projects. We could do,
Okay.
I'm just using the Woburn Street as an example, you know, renovate, enlarge it, incorporate the Wildwood student population in that would be a project.
And just to expand upon that and to perhaps clarify, it certainly is the case that communities in a similar position may have more than one project on the go at a time, but only with the funding, from MSBA can that go towards one active project. Certainly communities all the time build or renovate school facilities and do not engage MSBA. But, you know, one project at a time with MSBA is what their requirements are, so.
Thank you.
Mr. President, just a question. I'm an alternate, I realize that, but in line with enrollment in projecting out for schools, have you had discussion with the town manager about projects that are taking place in town that are going to be building apartment units and condo units? We have 3 projects, I think, going on, Princeton Properties. There's one over near Butters Road. There's one potential across from Yentile. And then there's, what I understand, maybe a 4th over near 93 near Mobile. So, and I know that they're built so that, you know, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and only so many families, but you project the students in those for your enrollment, because I know the enrollment's going down, but
Right.
and we're talking about consolidation, but taking that into effect, that may sway how this committee looks at just building a Wildwood, making it bigger because of a potential enrollment increase
Sure,
in the future when those projects are built.
sure. Yeah, I'll let Paul speak to that, because he's been a little bit more directly involved with MSBA around the enrollment
Yeah,
piece.
so in the enrollment questionnaire that was an online, the town, Brian and Jeff, there was a piece of that asked for, I think, new housing sales, any new projects on the horizon and so forth. And so part of that whole project was not only our current enrollment, but also the, I think housing, like births were in there, and
Yeah, I had worked with Paul to provide the submission to the MSBA on it. They were looking for information on basically home sale data from recent years. They're looking for new births through the clerk's office. They're looking through building permits for single-family, multi-family home permits that have been pulled for the last couple of years, as well as any projects that are basically with status through the planning board as to where they are on permitting, and looking for number of bedrooms for single-family, two-bedroom, or number of units for one-bedroom, two-bedroom, et cetera, and where they are in the permitting process that are expected within the next 2 years. So we
Thank you. So
provided
that's
all
all taken
that, correct.
So that was all taken into consideration, and
Yes.
the enrollment's still going down? Okay, great. Thank you.
well, I think, so the projected enrollment, we're not sure what that is. The MSBA process did, it was an online process, so we filled in current enrollment with all this other information, and then at there's
This is
a
where we're-
projected enrollment kind of spits out at the end, if you will. And I think that's what we're going to have a discussion when they contact us with MSBA to kind of see, does that make sense? Because it really, if we looked out the 10 years, I think it did, the enrollment was not really going down in the elementary level, based on this model that they have. But I think we have to talk to them, and that's before we finalize what a projected enrollment or design enrollment would be.
Which, that certification is, if I remember correctly, of the enrollment, as they call it, is something that takes place and will be finalized by the end of December, I think. So, just as a quick point of reference for that, it's hard to sort of wrap your head around that. This is so far in the early stages of such a project, but the certification, once the enrollment becomes certified, which again is in, about 6 weeks from now, it's that enrollment, as I understand it, that is the constant around which any project will have to adhere or align to. In other words, and I think this is correct, that even if 2 years from now there's a change in enrollment, they will draw or reference back to the enrollment number now, which is, or at the end of December, which is why sometimes you'll see in a community that they do partner with MSBA, a brand-new building comes online, and then short time thereafter, modulars have to be added. Sometimes, in rare circumstances, maybe, but because there's been developments that were not perhaps predicted or projected at the time. I've seen it happen on a couple of occasions, but if you get the number right and the data and the predictions are strong, then hopefully you're right-sized for future development.
Out of curiosity, what about this building? How's enrollment been here, and how accurate was MSBA's prediction a couple of years ago when they projected this building? Is it in line with what they said back then?
This was built for 960 students. We're below that, and we've been losing students each year. I haven't gone back to see how that projection was. I know the process, it was easier. When we did the enrollment for the high school, it's one building, and you kind of could project that out. We're doing elementary with the potential of, pre-KK.
Sure.
Pre-K to 3 or pre-K to 5. So the MSBA now has an online methodology for projecting out based on all the information we inputted, new housing starts and all that stuff, and they come up with some enrollment numbers. But I have not gone back and, when we did it back then, to see what it was. I know when we did the high school, it was initially like 930, and I remember Joanne, superintendent, and Mike Heyer, actually, a bunch of us went to the MSBA and kind of talked through, and that's when we got up to 960 students, and that was what this building was built for, so. Yeah, so we're below the 960 right now.
Yeah, just curious to see how accurate they were back then and what we're doing now. In terms of the brochure, I love the layout. I think it's very polished looking. It looks great, and I agree with everything that the committee members have said tonight. Just on page 6, when we're looking at the photos of the school, additional concerns, I think that the town does such a great job in keeping the school in order that it doesn't look horrible. And the two bottom pictures are almost identical. I'm wondering if there's something that we could maybe, a physical plant, a boiler or something that just is really old looking, or something on the exterior of the school that's really old looking, we could substitute
The
in there.
boiler.
Just something,
boiler.
just something
Boiler.
that looks egregious, you know,
Yes.
that, I mean, these don't look bad,
Right.
but that's
Nurse's
just a
office.
reflection of how well the
Yeah.
school's
Yeah.
maintained, you know? Unless
Well-
you look really close and you look at the ceiling and stuff like
Sure,
that.
sure.
Are there any stains or leaks or, and I'm sure they're not, because like I said, we do a great job
Right.
with the school, or the building department
You-
does.
You also, thank you for that feedback. You know, I actually realize as you're, I believe we talked about this last time, I know we did actually, the video
Yeah.
that we have available.
see it. It
And I
was
don't
great.
think,
Yep.
I don't think I mentioned that in here, and that probably wouldn't be a bad thing to draw
Sure, you
attention
could
to.
put a link in there and,
Right, right.
that'd be great.
Thank you for that
Good
feedback.
point.
So
Great question.
we can certainly do, this is, I think all the images that, we could certainly gather more, and
Sure.
if
I
they
just think make
seem
it
to
look
hit the.
bad, make it look really bad. We're
Yeah,
trying
no,
to-
I
Well, I
agree.
mean, you gotta
Some of
justify
these
it.
are- yeah.
You're trying to justify
These
these,
look great, these pictures.
Yeah.
right,
Okay,
yeah, yeah,
good feedback.
Yeah. yeah, yeah.
I tell you,
The-
the shot
the
of the
board-
bathroom where the.
The bathroom too,
is-
yeah, that's
Yeah.
a really good picture.
Right.
Or the bathroom to the nurse's office.
May I just go back to the earlier question, or the comment around the, what if we don't pursue in that table
yes.
there and such? And, I mean, I just wanted to continue on that point, because, you know, it dawns on me a couple of things, and that's obviously and this has been my experience in past sort of situations where it seems to be helpful to point out to the sort of the person who's not as keyed into all of this, that, well, if you don't do anything, then everything can, you know, just continue status quo, which, as we talked about here, of course, certainly isn't the case. I'm wondering if you think that this table serves a purpose, should it be extracted and just some examples thrown in? You know, the other thing that's not in here, as I'm reading this, is any mention of the middle school. And to be fair, you know, the middle school is a building that, I don't want to speak for Mr. Hooper, but it's 22 years old or thereabouts, and it certainly, I know, will have some capital expenditures necessary in the short term. So, you know, we're focused on the elementary, so maybe that's okay. Maybe it's off to the side, it's separate, but I certainly wouldn't want somebody to suggest that we were being less than forthcoming in terms of operational costs for future schools in the absence of mentioning anything about the middle school. But so anyway, I just wanted to circle back and get your sense of that. Is that, for the reasons mentioned, do you suggest perhaps that table is taken out and that this section is modified around the projected costs? If it's fine, if you think it's fine as is, then certainly we can leave it.
I have no problem adding the middle school personally, if we could come up with an appropriate estimated cost for,
Some capital needs.
I hope it'd be a low number, but
Yeah, I think, I think the roof at some point will be, I don't think the roof has been done there, but we can flush that out with George, but,
yeah, I have no
I don't
objection.
know what that's going to be adding to the persuasiveness of this.
yeah.
I mean, the point is, we're not going to be renovating, replacing the middle school anytime soon. And, I mean, I think that I think we should keep the emphasis on the elementary schools, the age of the elementary schools, the increasing and projected maintenance costs of them, and that's why we need to, you know, work on the elementary schools with this project.
And I would, Mr. Chair, if I may, I would just only add, and maybe as a counter argument, I don't want to call it an argument, because it's not an argument, but maybe an argument for adding the middle school is to say to the community, look, you know, these other schools are in great shape, you know, and, you know, other than just some routine maintenance and maybe a roof down the line, the middle school's in good shape. It's what we need to focus on, is the elementary schools. I mean, which seems obvious to everyone at this table, but maybe not to everyone who's not paying attention at home.
And I think we should add the word elementary to even the first bullet if we keep this in. Even if we don't pursue a new facility, the town will be obligated to make capital investments in our existing elementary facilities. So it hones in on that we're just saying, you know, and if we keep the chart, this is really associated with elementary facilities versus,
And that chart on page 9, Estimated cost of the target years of completion dollars, that column there,
Yes.
maybe one is red for a color there. I can get the layout in the color in the brochure, but I think that supplementing the red go a long way.
The other point to perhaps consider is, so the amount that's being, the amounts that are being referenced here are just, one fiscal year, so fiscal, well, for the Wildwood, for example, 350,000 is referenced based upon fiscal '21 dollars. But it may be worth noting, and we'd have to go back and look at the capital plan, but what is in store in the years that follow, because that's really only part of the story, so to speak. The roof replacement, whether it's 382 or whether the number is higher, there's, I have to believe, other significant costs to that building that are going to need to be addressed over the next 5 years.
I wonder if it's worthwhile putting a small citation at the bottom of like where this table came from, what's the source?
Very good point. Right, thank you.
Does the Wildwood, speaking in terms of the capital plan, does the Wildwood merit its own chart on projects maybe further along than we're looking at on this?
Would be a nice follow-up.
Put the focus on just the Wildwood and its needs.
And one thing about this chart that's also worth, I think, bearing in mind is that most of these costs we're gonna be paying no matter what we do regarding this project or not. Woburn boiler replacement, west boiler, Woburn window, I mean, these are going to have to happen on schedule because we're not going to be coming in with this project and, revamping all of these schools. So I think that and obviously most of the rest of the focus is on Wildwood, but that really needs to be, it's like, we need to do something about Wildwood. That's the school that can't continue on and needs to be addressed. I think it is a good point that you don't have no cost to just do nothing. Like the idea of just like, well, let's just not spend money and just kind of maintain. And eventually those costs become very high as well without regular maintenance. But, one way or the other, we are going to be paying most of this $10 million no matter what we do with this project.
Other suggestions, comments, or feedback on this, on the document?
We have at the bottom, in red, the feasibility study.
Right.
I guess the reason that you have it set up that way is because of the question as to whether the appropriation would happen or not.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, yes, I wasn't, thank you. I wasn't sure how to list that. And maybe, I don't know, what, do you think it should be listed?
I don't think we don't want to assume anything, but,
Mr. Chair, on the next page, did you have thoughts under where it says, I know you have it in red as to be added later, but about the ongoing MSBA process, you would add, what we're doing now, next steps type of description?
Now, how is this going to reach the public?
Thank you, very good question. So right into that, just before we do though, perhaps, so we can certainly, and we will incorporate the suggestions here that have been raised. I certainly did want to get a sense of the committee if this is a document that you believe this committee should approve, once it's finalized, or are you comfortable with us just taking back your recommendations and making those changes? I wanted to get a sense of how you wanted to proceed. Obviously, I think it's important to have this as something that this group is comfortable with and can support. And so, your thoughts on that?
The one thing I would say is, with everything going on from this point forward, you've got the holidays coming up, people are going to be very, very busy. And your actual special meeting, special annual town meeting for this isn't until March. You want to educate the people, but if you send out information too early, they'll just forget about it, or it'll be misplaced or trashed or whatever. I think timing is a crucial part of, educating the public, and, whether the forums are going to take place. And as you said, there's going to be information on social media and so on and so forth. Unless your thought process is that to get the people aware, they know a special town meeting's coming up, does it serve a purpose to send it out now to get them thinking about it, those that are interested in it? Maybe it'll give them a lot of thought to ask more questions about it. That's I'm going back and forth with this. If you're going to put a lot of time in it, and if this is going to be the only brochure that's going to go out, maybe it's closer to the actual town meeting. That's my opinion. It's just my opinion on that.
Well, I would think we would want to message a lot more than this one brochure going out to the community.
Right.
And I think starting earlier is better than starting later at this point. I think we start now, and we just keep coming up with material to get out to the public as we go forward toward March. It's
So the-
never too early to
So
start.
the brochure would be the initial
Right.
setting the groundwork, sort of setting the groundwork. And then there may be others coming along that may not be as elaborate as this, but follow through.
We really need to make public awareness on this. And the more information we get out there, whether we do it on a monthly basis or bi-weekly basis, we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I like so far what the school's done with the website. I think that's gonna be critical moving forward. I would imagine this document will be added to it. The links to the meetings that we're having will be added to it, so it'll be evolving as we go along. But, this is a great way to direct folks to that.
So this would then be mailed out to,
Well, that's a good question. So certainly a couple of things. We certainly can print hard copies of this. This would, it's a lot of pages, single-sided, but when double-sided, it's 5, right? And so it'd be a booklet format. We also can make it a booklet format, literally a flip book or a PDF, I guess, format, electronically, so that will be available. Yes, in terms of, it's certainly something that I don't think there's any issues with us emailing our families with. I don't think that there's any, this is not material for bringing attention to vote. I think we can do that, can we not?
I think so, although that may be something to have a conversation with the council about. You were on that session.
Right, yes.
Yeah,
The parameters, if you will, or the rules of what you can, is from a system standpoint or communication standpoint, you can push out to taxpayers effectively.
One of the things maybe that's worth mentioning is that if some of us at the table will recall in 2011, when we first started the school for this building here, this project, there was also a PAC, that went along with that I
Right.
happened to be a member of, but the 4.0 committee was working alongside, unofficially, separate from the town.
Sure.
And we were able to campaign and rally support. I wonder if something like that would need support on the side to be able to do exactly what you guys were just discussing, is it may not be appropriate for the town to put this out through the school system, and then if that's the case, would it be advantageous to have a PAC? But as I'm saying it out loud, perhaps maybe it's too late for.
I don't recall when the town, when the request was made for the feasibility study on the high school, that the PAC was in place at that point. I could be wrong, but I thought it ultimately came together after the feasibility stage, and once, the project was, there was a request for funding of the construction. I thought that it came together at that stage.
That sounds about right.
Yes, because I remember you and I going down Deming Way.
I felt like it was 2011, but I could be wrong.
It was after, yes, it was for the annual town meeting that was going to vote the final money for the project. I believe you're right, Jeff. And groups were forming and going to
It's-
different areas.
It's never too early, in my estimation, to get various groups involved, certainly whether it's parent groups or other organizations, in, providing information about, even at this stage, what we're seeking, which is the feasibility study money. It's, it's certainly a significant amount of money, approximately $1 million, but in not nearly at the level of what a construction project will be. So, whether there are groups that unofficially are able to, or officially get together that are not under the town umbrella, it certainly would be helpful. But I don't know that it's critical that there be a so-called 4.0 committee that convenes between now and the a special town meeting. Couldn't hurt, but I don't think it's critical that it happen now. It's just my opinion.
And just to piggyback on kind of what Ms. Allen and Ms. Galezo said, is that I think as earlier we can get some of the public forums going, I think it'd be better, have people come in, ask questions. I'm sure there'll be questions
Right.
around enrollment, some of the questions that were asked tonight, and the sooner we can start doing that, the better. I agree.
Yeah. And also viewing the school itself. We talked about an open house at
Yes.
school
Great idea.
to, have people actually see it. Because I think for the 55 years I've lived in this town, one thing I have taken away from many, many annual town meetings is when people aren't clear about what they're voting on, they'll vote no. And we want people that are coming to that meeting to be very clear. And pretty much, we have fleshed out all the questions that we think are out there. And whether that requires further brochures with the questions on them and the answers, so that when the people come in there, they're not going to be confused over the presentation that's going to be made for the feasibility study. Now, I know a lot of times feasibility studies slide right through, but we do have other building projects going on, and I'm not so sure. I don't have a crystal ball to know what will happen in March, but people are aware that because of the information that's out there, both on social media and the taping of the meetings and everything, that other buildings are going to be built in this town. And we're under feasibility studies already. So, I think people have to get a lot of information out and be very clear about what's happening with the Wildwood School. And I would agree that the brochure, as well as forums, and it's gonna be a tough time of year. You're not only gonna have the holidays, but after that, you're gonna run into bad weather, you know? And then again, we could have the warming trend come in, as everybody's talking about. So, which I hope, for the benefit of meetings, that happens. But I would definitely say the more educated that people are, the better off this project will be.
I think that's why the focus has to be on Wildwood above all. Because if you start talking too much about consolidation, well, that sounds maybe like a nice to have. Maybe it'd be nice to consolidate schools, but, do we really need to? We really need to replace Wildwood. It cannot continue. We cannot continue to educate students there, for much longer. And so that's, I think, has to be the focus. So people really they know exactly why they're going in there, and then hopefully getting an affirmative vote. It's because we need to replace this school, and so that we have safe and appropriate facilities to educate our kids.
Because I think a parent, not only a parent, I think a taxpayer or a senior, whatever, is going to say, well, is the boiler going down? Is, what's your plan B if there's no heat for the school? Where would the students go? And what is your expectation of how long we really can wait before this project moves forward? And I'm just trying to anticipate some of those types of questions, whereas as the brochures keep coming out, maybe, you'll see those questions and be able to answer them, so that it isn't through social media that just takes something and runs with it, and is not truthful. Coming from the actual school department and answering those questions would be more appropriate.
The MSBA sets out their timetable that the town has to follow anyways with the project, so it's not gonna languish too much. We have to meet certain deadlines for MSBA.
And-
Maybe
and-
that might be something we put in as the actual deadlines set by MSBA.
And that's a very good point that you raised, because people are gonna say, well, why? Why all of a sudden? And they have to understand how things work when you're trying to get this money from SBAB. They have certain requirements and certain deadlines, and why are you having a special town meeting? Why does it have to be in March? Why can't it wait till the annual town meeting? I know the reason. People around this table know the reason. But the people out there that are gonna vote on it, most of them probably have no idea. No idea. And no idea why this is becoming a priority.
Maybe that's content for another piece of literature. A one-more piece of literature that we
Mm-hmm,
can come out with in January or something like that.
yeah, yeah.
I think it's also worth communicating that we were very lucky to get into the MSBA program this year. That, only a small number, 11 schools out of 77, I mean.
I think it was 12 out of
15 out of
70 or
71,
something.
we
I
said.
mean, but
15
so
out of
it's,
71.
we were fortunate to be, invited into the program this year, and there's absolutely no guarantee that we would a different year, so. if
Actually,
people-
in the brochure.
Yeah, stand corrected, 15 out of 71. right.
171.
And it
It's like
points
next
to
year, the
the-
process just starts over again, and you get no advantage for being there first.
And I think to that point it's not, I would argue, not a matter of fortune as much as it is the compelling need that MSBA, a third party who, is associated, so to speak, with the town, but the people that looked at the application and had the conversations with us and toured the school virtually clearly understood that amongst all the communities that they had to review, that this was a real compelling need.
Sorry, I couldn't see in the bright lights.
As an alternate, I don't know if this is okay, but to sort of, what everyone is talking about right now in the repair replacement is the lowest dollar amount on this chart. So I don't want this, I think that numbers are really helpful, but I don't want the chart to sort of dissuade people, because if we, do you understand what I mean? So if we focus on the consolidation, this makes sense. But if we want to focus on the Wildwood, I'm not sure that the chart does help us in that case, because the Wildwood item line is the lowest. Unless we do what Greg was saying, which is to really compile more data and more numbers in terms of what are the other things? Because if we all walk into the Wildwood, we're like, oh, yes, right? But if we're just looking at this data chart and people don't take the time to watch the video or go to this open house, then I think that it could be a disadvantage for the project.
Actually, one thing that I was just thinking that, and it just popped into my head, so the video is great, and in one level you say, it's like 10 minutes, and you get like this full walk through the building. But that's a lot more time than a lot of people will want to spend, just being kind of shown, here's the popcorn ceiling here, and here's, I wonder if we could take that and edit that down to give like a 2-minute highlights of the building that might just have a way bigger chance of people actually sticking around for those full 2 minutes, or whatever the number is, but something less than 10 minutes, because I think there really are a lot of people that, they go on it and they say like, this thing is 10 minutes long, and then, 45 seconds in, they're just like, I'm not gonna get to the end of this and not go any further. But I think the video is compelling if you watch it, but probably the highlights could be compelling as well.
And I wonder if we partnered that with like almost a verbal update from, the chair or whoever about the process as we go along, so if you partnered the two, you have short media clips that can be shared out, and people may be, to your point, more inclined to watch 2 minutes than they are 10 minutes.
Sure.
Maybe some will watch the 10 minutes, but for those who don't, you could partner that with some, verbiage around what's going on, what's the latest, and if you put out a series of those, perhaps people may take the time, they might catch one, or two.
I was thinking about and thank you, this is really helpful, the PTOs that we do have that are standing bodies right now, we certainly can share the message with, and our school councils, and so I think there are ways to certainly continue to push this message out. I think one question I had for the group, and that is around the focus groups, the tour or tours are easy enough to schedule, and we'll certainly do our best to bring attention to that. And I think for that, it would make sense to me to probably wait until the new year, given where we're at with the holidays. I do think that we can easily make the revisions to this and start the campaign before the holidays. It's a few clicks, well, more than a few clicks to finalize it, but to certainly push it out. Do you have specific thoughts? We have our next meeting January the 11th, and so maybe your thought is we can wait until then to sort of give this some more thought. But in terms of the focus, not the focus group, but the forums, I'm curious your thoughts, and for those of you that know the town much deeper than I, in terms of where, when, and what might make sense to try and bring together people to expand or to share this message.
I think at a minimum, we ought to target, January and February, at least one in each of those months leading up to don't forget the March date is gonna be like, I think the first week or second week in
Yes.
March, so
Yeah.
it's gonna happen really fast.
Very quickly.
And thank you, yes, and as far as the location, I'd like to see the forum perhaps at the Wildwood. It's just another opportunity to bring them there and
Yeah.
see it with their own eyes, and,
Yep, yeah.
but, identifying, a time and, work it around the school calendar.
That's where we are tickets and cream at the school, give people in there.
Mhm.
Maybe if you partnered that with, 2 open houses, where they could just come in and walk through, and maybe there's somebody here from this committee to answer questions if they had it, but maybe not call it a forum. If you did 2 of those as well, then all of a sudden you've had 4 unique events.
Right.
I mean, again, it's a short window from New Year's to March 8th. That would be a good starting point, I think.
I agree with that, yeah, that would.
Seeing is believing. The, going back to, I'm sorry, I don't know, Melissa. I thought I'm thinking now what you just said, and what I'm thinking about is the page that says, what if we don't pursue any new or renovated school facilities, okay? Maybe, we've included a lot of schools here, and as she said, the lowest amount here is at the Wildwood School, which I think, tends to get a little misleading for the people on what needs to be, what's wrong with that school? I mean, if I were reading this for the first time, I'm saying, that's all? Just a roof replacement? And we're going through all this. Whereas maybe we need to detail out the major deficiencies of the school and what those are, with some costs associated with them. And I'm sure that, I don't know if you had to do that with SBAB when, did they ever come out to look, do they come out to look at the school?
They did a virtual tour. Normally they do, but that was in the height of COVID. And so they engaged with with through a virtual tour. That's
Through
actually the
virtual
video,
tours.
that video
That's the
that
video
was
that's on the
mentioned
website. Is
was the purpose.
Yes, okay.
But it is a great point, and I, again, without Mr. Hooper here, but I don't know if he has specifically, outlined all of the respective costs. If we were looking at the Wildwood just as to continue in its operation, not just Band-Aids. I mean, the roof and these are, let's face it, these are envelope items.
Right.
That are just to protect the building, and nothing around the interior, redesign of a 50, 60, 70, 60-year-old building. And so I don't truly know if he has those together.
I don't know, but clearly, the roof, the windows, the whole heating system has never been updated since 1955, and that in and of itself, I'm sure, is incredibly costly because
Right.
you're,
How far out does your capital plan, your capital improvement plan go? Is it
the
5?
5-year rolling. Yep.
You know better than any of us would. I mean, does it look like there's a lot of tickets to be punched for the Wildwood over the next 5 years there on the plan?
No, I think I'll just try and, I can't speak for George on this. I don't think the figures he has was really designed for
Okay.
what it was put in here. I think he's trying to put any realistic projects that he has in there. There's obviously work that his team does throughout the year through other various stuff that doesn't qualify as a capital project. I also would just assume without trying to speak for George, but I think that a lot of the stuff he didn't include for the Wildwood is because we've been targeting in this direction and trying to pursue a building project for it. If he was asked, I'm sure he'd come up with a pretty good list of what the issues are and what they need. I know, just going back to the book from the master facility plan from a couple of years ago, that's very detailed.
It was.
For all of the schools, not just the Wildwood.
Correct.
And that speaks in great detail of where they were as of 2018, what the issues were in a time frame or a roadmap to try and get those, the upkeep met, so.
So we can certainly revisit that with George, and we can take a look at that.
Yeah, I think he
I
can
think we've been
probably tailor
deliberately
that
not
better.
trying to sink a lot of money
Yeah,
into the
yeah.
school.
Right.
Just like, what's the minimum that we can get by on?
So for time's sake, maybe take out that whole page and we can do that as another flyer at a later time.
Can I ask something, and I'm talking without thinking this completely through, but we have this brochure, it's about 10 pages. Do you think it makes sense to break it up, almost to David's comment, that shorter, people might focus
Yep.
more? So maybe a brochure goes out with, the introduction page, as an example, and maybe the schedule of deliverables that says why we're doing this now. And then another one, 2 weeks or 3 weeks later could go out, talk about the town master plan, the findings, why should consolidation be considered? Just kind of break this up into 3 or 4
And maybe just
smaller
a
groups.
combination of everything that we do. This is like,
Yeah, I'm just thinking that way you give people a little bit of time every 2 or 3 weeks, and then intermingled in there, we might have a open house at the Wildwood so they can actually see the building for themselves. I'm just wondering, I know that in here, it does talk a little bit, the impact on teaching and learning. There's no dollars associated, but, it talks about the classrooms are crowded, the airflow and air quality, the glasses or whatever. So it kind of talks about that without dollars associated with it, but I'm just wondering if it makes sense to do something like that.
Well, I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
The only thing I was
Makes
just
sense.
concerned about is that, you know, we're talking a time frame about 68 days, right? After the new year to March 8th, you know, almost, you know, what, 8, 9 weeks without a meeting of this group till January 11th. So we'd have to be really strategic on how we, you know, we haven't really finalized this. I agree with some of the comments, and maybe we need to revisit this table clearly, based on the discussion here tonight. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we're not biting off more than we could chew if we're not going to meet till January 11th again. Because I like the idea, you know, and that would just continue to have this project in your face, you know, every time you went to the mailbox, every time you opened up your computer or your phone, that you're constantly getting information. I like that, but can we do it?
I would agree with you, Paul, on that, and I think that in order for people to digest what's going on, they get a little bit of the history, and they're getting a little bit of knowledge of why now. They're gonna get an understanding of he who has the gold rules, and SBAV has the gold. So we have to play by their rules. You know, just common things like that to make the person understand, and then more to follow. Second brochure coming out, we'll be talking about in detail the deficiencies of the Wildwood School, and we're going, our forum will be scheduled for such and such a date, and open house and stuff like that, and you can have bulleted items. But to have a long 10-page brochure, just at one time, I like your idea much better.
It's almost like if we finalize this and then we broke it down.
Mhm.
into, you know, spending some time just kind of, all the comments that we heard tonight, kind of finalize, then we figure out how to like, slice it. So there's, you know, a little bit at a time.
What you want to do with each of those pieces is leave a cliffhanger at the end, so they're waiting with bated breath for the next version to
Like
come.
like Netflix does with all their series.
Yeah, with all their series, right?
So who's not here? George, so we should give that to George's responsibility, right?
Plot twists.
And so, forgive me, but just to clarify, so is there any opposition with us taking back the recommendations to tweak and adjust, edit such, this document? And we can figure out what seems to make sense to split it or pare it down into different segments or parts and start that communication plan before we meet next?
I think we have to start communicating.
Yes, you have to start communicating, yep.
Word of that, okay, just wanted to make sure.
I'm not opposed to having this available in its full entirety, like, well, on the website or at the library, you know, somewhere like that.
Sure.
But, you know,
Okay,
when it comes to mailings,
yep, okay.
I like Paul's idea.
I think with that said, though, that maybe we do just take out the one section for the time being with the breakdown of the school costs, until we can get a better
Until we tweak
understanding that.
and
Yep, okay,
get more mileage on that.
great. That's all very helpful, thank you. So we said a couple times, but our next, and thank you for filling out the survey. So the next date was around what seemed to work best for everyone, or most everyone in the group. And so our next meeting right now is scheduled for Tuesday, January the 11th. And hopefully that still works for most. That meeting will be here in the high school again. And we will again seek the partnership of WCTV to record that meeting. And we'll also make those, I know they're a great partner, and we can make the clips to these meetings available and put those links on the website as well, too, in case people want to cut to the chase and find that information. That brings us to, at this point, public comment. If there's any public comment tonight? And seeing none, I guess we'd be looking for a motion to adjourn this evening.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Approval of minutes from last meeting.
We did that earlier this evening.
Beginning.
So, sorry, where are we? All those in favor?
We
Right?
did.
We did,
I made
okay,
the
good,
motion.
sorry, good. All right, thank you so much. Very good, unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
WCTV, connecting our community.